that. The first is, please use the chat to express enthusiasm, support, engagement, resources. All of that stuff should go in the chat, and we encourage you to be active. If, however, you have questions that you would like to put to us or to the panelists or to presenters, please use the Q&A function so that we see your questions and they don't get lost in the avalanche of support and enthusiasm that will be the chat. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A. If you have excitement, enthusiasm, thoughts you want to share, use the chat. And if you find the chat overwhelming, it's okay. Don't look at it. Everything you need will be in the presentation, and we can share the chat with you afterwards.
So as we all get comfortable and get settled, we're going to cue a video now to give you a glimpse into the powerful momentum for change that's been brewing and underpinning this gathering, and give you a glimpse of the amazing global community that we're all part of. So let's go.
Peter Brewster from Singapore.
From Turkey.
From Portugal.
From Melbourne, Australia.
From Ibiza, Spain.
Commits to net zero.
Carbon neutral.
Se compromete a la carbono neutralidad.
Al global trade.
By 2030.
Al 2030.
COVID strain, originally found in India, is responsible for 20% of newly diagnosed cases in the nation. Local health experts are worried unvaccinated will be hit the hardest.
By 2030.
From Italy.
From Denmark.
United Kingdom.
From Melbourne in Australia.
France.
From Taipei.
Switzerland.
De Bogotá, Colombia.
From Ghent, Belgium.
From Mexico City.
From Western Canada.
USA.
De Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Chile, Colombia y Brasil. Melbourne, LA and London.
Across our entire global business.
For the future of our home planet.
Wow, that was cool. How awesome it is to be part of a movement involving so many businesses and people around the world who've made the commitment to become net zero. And this journey is just getting started. Hello, my name is Mindy. I'm from B Lab Australia and New Zealand, and I'm also part of the Global Climate Task Force. And I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, co-MC, Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin Wright. I'm with a B Corp called Habitus Incorporated, and we've been with the B Corp Climate Collective in the US and Canada since the beginning. And I'm so thrilled to be co-MCing with Mindy. We're going to be your trail guides today as we journey through this amazing program. And so for those of you who haven't already, please put your name and where you're coming from in the chat. I've already seen people from New Zealand, Vancouver, Denver, DC, Taiwan, Taipei, Bangkok, Philippines, Melbourne. Mindy, what have I missed?
Oh, you've mentioned many of them. We just want to say hello, welcome, 欢迎, selamat datang, kia ora, to as many of you, and we're so glad you're here.
We are so glad. And so this is the work we're doing together. This wouldn't be possible without you being with us. So thank you all for being present today. And before we kick into the full event, I want to start by grounding us with a land acknowledgement. We are very lucky to have with us today an elder from the Atacama region of Argentina named René Calpanchay. René is co-creator and president of the System of Indigenous Peoples. And he is going to be joining us later in the program also for a conversation about climate justice. But he generously agreed to open us with a conversation, a land acknowledgement that will bring us together and center in where we are. And Lorena Espinosa will be interpreting into Spanish. So we'll hear, into English from Spanish. We'll first hear René in Spanish, and then Lorena will translate into English. So enjoy.
Llamo a este seminario web desde las tierras ancestrales de los pueblos andinos, particularmente del pueblo Atacama, con territorio en la Puna Salada o desierto de Atacama. Presento mis respetos a sus ancianos pasados y presentes. Por favor, tómense un momento para considerar las tribulaciones detrás de nuestras realidades históricas, incluida la violencia, el desplazamiento, la migración y los procesos de colonización que nos juntan el día de hoy. Y por favor, únanse a nosotros y visibilicen estas verdades en todos y cada uno de los eventos públicos en los que participen a futuro, especialmente mediante la reflexión crítica y sosteniendo conversaciones dentro de sus propias comunidades.
I'm calling into this webinar from within the ancestral lands of the Andean people, but particularly of the Atacama people in the Puna Salada territory, also known as the Atacama Desert. I pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the tribulations behind our historical realities, including violence, displacement, migration, and colonization that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events in the future, particularly through critical reflection and conversations within your own community.
Los invitamos a pensar acerca de la tierra en la que viven y en la influencia de legados que los han traído a estar donde están. Los invitamos a compartir en el chat el nombre de la tierra y de las tierras ancestrales desde los cuales se están conectando a este seminario web, y a que reconozcan a las primeras naciones de dichas tierras. Si no están seguros del nombre de las tierras ancestrales en las que se encuentran o sus pueblos originarios, compartiremos un recurso a través del cual pueden averiguarlo. Gracias. Esperamos que disfruten de la cumbre.
We invite you to consider the land on which you live and the confluence of legacies that brought you to be where you are. Feel free to share in the chat the land and ancestral lands from which you're calling into this webinar and acknowledge the First Nations people of those lands. If you're not sure whose ancestral lands you're on, we will share a reference where you can find out. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the summit.
Gracias, René. Thank you, René. I'm calling in from the ancestral lands of the Wampanoag. Mindy, where are you calling from?
I'm calling in from the land of the Warana people, who are traditional custodians of the Adelaide Plains in South Australia. And I acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging.
Thank you. So we want to give you all a moment to do that. There's links in the chat that Kelsa's put in that Renee invited you to check out. And please just take a moment and put into the chat what you find, if you don't already know, about what are the ancestral lands from which you are calling in. So we'll just give you a minute to do that before we move on. Amazing. Thank you all so much. It's so important to acknowledge this history, as Renee said, both the parts to celebrate and the parts of the history that are harder to face. So thank you all for acknowledging this. And let's, with that, turn to what we're here to do.
Awesome, Justin. Now, let's look at the purpose of our gathering today and over the next 2 days. And there are really 4 things that we're here to do. Firstly, we want to center the conversation around climate justice, and you'll hear a lot more about that. We're also here to build trust and community, and we've already seen a glimpse of this global community that's coming together now. Thirdly, we want to catalyze action and build on the momentum of the work that's been done prior to this moment in time. Finally, we want to equip all B Corps and other mission businesses on their journey towards net zero with justice at the center. So there are the 4 things, and you can find more about that in the program.
Yes.
What else have we got, Justin?
Yes, and so if we do all this, what are we going to have at the end of these 2 hours? So what we want at the end of these 2 hours is for you to be inspired, to be motivated, to be driven, to take action, to go above and beyond what you already are doing, to take those next steps around this. Now, the second is that we are just the first part. This is the kickoff of 3 days, and Mindy will tell you more about the details in a moment. But I want to just say, what comes next after this is regional gatherings. And all work, global in scale as it may be, ultimately happens locally. So it is vital that we engage in our regions to do this work locally. And so there are going to be regional days, and we hope that at the end of these next 2 hours, you know which regional day is best for you, and you will go to that when it happens in the next day. So the last thing in terms of outcomes, as Mindy said, is around community building. And so we are going to create some space at the end of this for those of you who want to hang around to actually have a chance to connect as if we were together in person, which across this global gathering is not possible. But here we can come together with the use of technology. And so we'll explain more about that at the end.
Thank you, Justin. And so just to summarize, we are here at day 1. This is the global kickoff. And there's a mirror session of this that actually took place 10 hours ago. So Justin, thank you for staying up late and doing this all over again with me. And once we kick off our global day, we roll into day 2, which is a series of regional events organized by your regional B Corp Climate Collective committees. And then day 3 is a series of community events organized by B Corps, because change must be made together. And we have over 70 sessions across the next 3 days that there is so much to engage in. So we're going to show you how to find out about that. Shortly, we're going to put a link in the chat to our to Shed, which is the online platform that you can select your session, which session you want to attend. The really important thing is to go to the top right corner and pick your time zone. And that will allow you to see all the sessions in your local time so that you're not signing up to a session at 2 a.m. And you can make sure that you show up to every session. So do that. We encourage you to engage with as many regional and local sessions as possible.
And SCED is an awesome resource. Anything you're wondering, you're like, oh, I wonder where this session is. Oh, who is that speaker? I'd love to learn more about them. Oh, I want to write to Justin because I have a question. Whatever, anything you need, SCED probably has the answer. So save that link. It'll have the links to get into the various sessions. If you need to register, it'll say it has everything you need. Okay, so let's turn from the big picture back now to today, to this 2 hours. In these 2 hours, we are going to start with some context setting. So some of you have been in this work from the beginning, but some of you are brand new, and welcome. We are so glad to have you. But we want all of us to be situated in, how did we get here? How did we end up on this call having this conversation? What's the work that's gotten us to this point? So we'll have a conversation about context. And then we will hear from two incredible speakers who are going to compel us into meaningful action around climate and centering justice. And then, because you should never have a meeting of more than 1 hour online without a break, we're going to do some yoga. So we'll have 5 minutes of desk yoga to allow you to shake out before we then go into the core piece of this, which is going to be a conversation around climate justice. We have invited to join us today leaders in climate justice leaders, who are going to share an answer to a core question for us, which is, what is the role of business in climate justice? How do we as businesses engage in this with high integrity? And then from there, we go into next steps in action. We figure out, where are you going for your regional gatherings? What else can we do from here to get engaged? And then we'll send you off with some beautiful music and a chance to mingle. So that's the plan for today. That's the flow. Did I miss anything, Mindy? I think that's all of it, right?
Yeah, well, if you have questions, please do not put it in the chat. Remember, there is a question and answer, the Q&A. That's where you put your questions. The chat is where you want to make noise, want to connect with others, share resources, +1 on good points that you've heard. That's where you put that. And we really encourage you to engage and to let us hear your voice. So,
thank you.
Yeah, and now, before we move on, we want to quickly acknowledge all the humans that have put their time and energy and love into bringing this gathering alive. And so big thanks to Sistema B, to B Lab, the B Corp Climate Collectives all around the world, as well as the B Global Climate Task Force that is led by Kim Kupanas and Shamin Love.
And this gathering, put on by those incredible organizations, is actually made possible by the humans who have showed up to speak and share their wisdom. And so we have, last I counted, Mindy, how many people?
There's more than 200 speakers and artists from all over the world.
So we are really well supported. We are well met with a lot of wisdom from our community that is making it possible for us to even gather and have these conversations. You can see a bunch of people who are going to be with us tonight or this morning, depending where you are in the world, but also throughout these 3 days. As Mindy said earlier, there's over 70 different sessions you might go to. So we're so grateful for all of the humans who are bringing their wisdom and expertise.
And it is not a festival, it's not a summit without the people who show up to it. So we want to thank all of you leaders who have decided to be part of this. And Justin, how many people do we have registered to come over the next 3 days?
It says 4,000 there, but we're up to 5,000 plus. So we've got 5,000 registered for all of the events over the next 3 days.
Across 100 countries from all corners of the world. So much gratitude and thank you for being here.
Awesome. So we will dive in a moment. I want to just quickly thank some very important organizations that have helped to make this possible. This event is a real production. Over the next 3 days, a lot is going to happen. And we've worked hard to make sure it's inclusive and that people can attend for free. But that has required the generous support of several key businesses who have stepped up to make this possible, who are real champions. So I want to thank a few. We're going to put up the slides. Thank you with logos. We're going to thank a few explicitly, and then we'll see the logos of more who have supported, and Kim and Alonda will thank the rest at the end, because we want to really give recognition to all. So I want to start with Danone North America, which is a certified B Corp, a key member of our community, and they make delicious food and beverages that are both good for you and the planet. I've had the privilege of working with their team, and they are amazing. We're so lucky to be able to collaborate with them and have them as part of the B Corp Climate Collective.
And I have the pleasure of thanking Natura & Co., one of the largest certified B Corps in the world. They touch millions and millions of lives. So thank you, Natura, who's also parent company of Avon, Natura, The Body Shop, and Aesop. Thank you for your support.
And thank you to Dr. Bronner's, another certified B Corp, who is leading in regenerative agriculture and doing really amazing work based on the principle that business shouldn't just reduce our impact, that we should actually have positive impact. And they're really modeling what does it look like to figure out how to do that as a business.
Oh, so much thanks goes to Gerdau, which is one of the world's most environmentally responsible steel producers. They're not yet a B Corp, but Gerdau is one of the handful of multinational publicly listed businesses that have joined the brand new B Movement Builders program, which is a pathway for multinationals. Thank you for supporting us.
And finally, at this stage, I want to thank Happily, who are the magicians behind all of this tech working smoothly, which is a lot. They are supporting with this event. They do event production and are dedicated to bringing the best of humanity together. We're so, so grateful for their support. They've been amazing to work with.
And there are many other amazing companies, as you can see here on the screen, who have contributed in their sponsorship and many other ways to make this summit available. Thank you.
Awesome. So with that, let's dive into the context. So for over the last 15 years that B Corps have been a thing, B Corps have been thinking about working on the issue of climate and climate change. And for those of you who are new to the B Corp concept, B Corps are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. And so in the last 3 years, a group of B Corps have started gathering around the world as the climate crisis has escalated to say, we need to really start working together, not just doing this work independently. And that birthed the B Corp Climate Collectives. And so we're going to now hear from leaders of the B Corp Climate Collectives and then the B Lab organization that coordinates, which is the B Lab's Global Climate Task Force, about what's been going on over the last several years of this work and how you can get involved. And then from there, we will jump into the inspiring conversations from our keynote speakers.
Hello, I'm Kim Kupinas. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the inaugural B Corp Global Climate Summit. I'm joined today by my amazing co-chair of B Lab's Global Climate Task Force, Charmian Love, and an amazing group of Sistema B and B Lab Global colleagues. This summit is bringing together leaders from around the world, a community of people committed to using the enormous power of business as a force for good. We're here to connect, to channel our collective courage, and to catalyze fierce determination to move faster, both individually and collectively, to stabilize our climate. Friends, let's be clear, this is an emergency. These are dangerous times. The scientific community is of one mind in warning us that we must cut global greenhouse emissions by 50% by 2030, meaning over the next 9 years.
Thank you, Kim. And I am loving the words that you're using here, right? This is about collective courage, and it's about fierce determination. Now, many of you will have seen that earlier this month, another summit happened here in the UK, the G7, where Sir David Attenborough warned that humans could be on the verge of destabilizing the entire planet, and that G7 leaders, and I would extend that to all of us, face the most important decisions in human history. In the words of Extinction Rebellion co-founder Gail Bradbrook, this is not a time for talk. This is a time to act, and to act now. In this spirit, our community's work to address climate emergency is oriented around 3 bold ambitions. Ambition number 1 is to redefine what it means to lead in such times. Ambition number 2 is to drive climate action centered in climate justice. And bold ambition number 3 is to change the rules of the game.
Now, one example of how we're redefining leadership and setting the pace on the race to zero as a community is the 533 brave B Corps who committed to net zero by 2030 at UN's COP25 in 2019 for scopes 1 and 2 and most relevant scope 3 emissions. It was the largest and most aggressive climate commitment to date by a group of businesses and 20 years ahead of the Paris Agreement 2050 targets. As part of that push to set the pace, there are now over 1,300 businesses, both B Corps and other businesses, that are committed to net zero emissions by 2030. For those of you who have made a commitment to be net zero, either by 2030 or any time before 2050, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you indeed. And as mission-driven leaders, you've been preparing for this moment in history for many years, and many of you for decades. Many of you have already made powerful commitments and are far along on this journey, and others might be just at the beginning. What we ask is for all of you to engage in this summit and this work with fierce determination to act, putting people and justice at the center of your work, and looking for ways that you can work collectively to aim higher, dig deeper, and move faster towards a just zero carbon future. We want you to act in a way that shows that you are moved by what is needed rather than limited by what feels possible. So to all of you today, be courageous, be radical, be fiercely determined, and be the change.
Thank you. And now over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Jar and Kim, for kicking us off. My name's Dan Osuski, and I'm the head of Standards and Insights at B Lab Global. And following on what Kim and Shar said, I have to say personally, I'm concerned not only about what climate change is doing to our world and our society, especially those who are most marginalized and the least responsible for it, but I'm also pretty concerned about our role in it, our role as a community. There's been a proliferation really in the last year of a lot of net zero commitments. And with that, a lot of big debates about definitions of these net zero commitments, what it actually means, and whether the concept is really even valid at all for businesses. As a former philosopher, I have to say I'm all for debates of those nature, and would be happy to discuss them in a little bit more length at a future time. But I'd like to actually quote one philosopher on this topic, which say the point isn't just to interpret the world, but to change it. The reality is the concept of net zero, as outlined and affirmed by global experts, is a significant acceleration and ambition for climate action for our world. And business obviously has an important role to play in that. What matters is what we actually mean by it and what we are actually doing to achieve it. Kim highlighted the number of commitments to net zero by 2030 within this community, emphasized it as pace setting. It is the largest and most aggressive climate commitment to date. That's all really positive and exciting. Not only does this obviously present an important moment for our world, but it also presents a fundamental risk for our movement. We cannot present ourselves as leaders. We can't talk about being the largest and most aggressive commitment by businesses unless we are actually doing it. And if we're not, we're doing the thing that this movement was designed to fight against, which is greenwashing. That's what turns my broad concerns into sleepless nights. I believe in how valuable what we are all collectively doing is for our world and how necessary it is. But it's really if we only do it right. If you're not yet a company who's committed to net zero by 2030, you should be, but don't do it lightly. Educate yourself and think about what it actually means. For those of you who already have, our request to you is we are launching a survey about your actions regarding the net zero commitment to create an ongoing method of accountability, as well as tracking to understand what you all are doing around this. So it takes commitment, yes, but commitment requires understanding and it requires action. And so keep it up, and step it up.
Thank you, Dan. Greetings, friends. I'm Raj Agarwal of Provoke. I'm so glad you're here. And for all the things that Dan named and everybody else on this panel that I get to spend time working with, I'm concerned too. Friends, we've been trying to solve the climate crisis for 50 years, and most efforts have failed because they've been divorced from the lived experience of the people being most impacted by the climate crisis. Climate change disproportionately and negatively impacts people who are least responsible for creating it, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, communities that are impoverished, and groups who are minoritized worldwide in far-reaching ways. Instead of embracing these truths, we often focus our climate conversations on decarbonization and net zero, and there actually isn't enough carbon credits to buy to even get to net zero for everybody who's committed, rather than fully integrating the lived experience of those on the front lines of this emergency. We have less than 10 years to have global emissions. This decade is pivotal to our very survival as a species, and our work to get there must place people and justice at the center of our work and our focus on people. In early 2020, a coalition of including B Lab, the COP26 Climate Champions team, my company Provoke, and the Scholl Center of Social Entrepreneurship at the University of Oxford developed a full on-ramp tool called the Climate Justice Playbook for Business that features insights and case studies from over 40 certified B corporations and the communities and humans they impact around the world. The playbook will help you understand the climate emergency as a justice emergency. It will help you link everything you're doing in the climate emergency to human rights, taking a human-centered approach and placing people and equity at the core. How can you plug in? Begin your climate justice journey here at this summit. You're going to hear powerful wisdom from the climate justice leaders and activists who have joined us today and over the next 2 days. I've had some time to be in their presence. I am completely transformed from that experience. Review the insights and obstacles shared in this playbook. Consider which most resonate for you personally and for your business. Personally is really important because that's what drives us. Share the playbook with your team and your fellow business leaders. Commit to centering people and justice in all of your work on climate going forward. Really commit. Invest in this work. For the past year, this work has been volunteer-led with support from a few dedicated businesses. We've just launched the Businesses for Just and Equitable Climate Coalition. And for this next pivotal phase of work, we need academics, activists, curriculum writers, business, and funders, a key on funders, ready to roll up their sleeves and get on with this journey. If you are any of those, we invite you to join this coalition. You can find a link to this new coalition in the chat. And thank you so much. And over to you, Marcel.
Thank you, Raj. I am Marcel Fukayama, the chair of the Global Policy Circle for B Lab. Indeed, businesses must do their part to fix our climate, but we will not be able to achieve a zero carbon future without fundamental reforms to our economic system. For the past 50 years, the doctrine of shareholder primacy has led to business becoming the primary driver of environmental and social degradation and driven society and our biosphere to the brink of collapse. And for the past 15 years, B Lab and Sistema B have been working in markets all over the world to change public policies that govern our economy and the purpose of business. We now have voluntary stakeholder-based corporate governance reforms in over 50 different jurisdictions and over 10,000 businesses that have adopted this corporate form in a global community of over 4,000 certified B corporations that are living examples of walking the talk on stakeholder governance. B Lab's global policy strategy is now going beyond voluntary benefit corp adoption to drive system-level policy change to enable a full shift to stakeholder capitalism so that all businesses and fiduciaries are accountable to maximizing benefits to all of their stakeholders, including the environment. We also need to work together with collective voice to pass meaningful climate policy, such a transition to 100% clean, renewable energy and a price on carbon so that a zero carbon future is even possible. So how can you help? Work to change the rules of the game. Start at home. If your company hasn't already embedded stakeholder considerations in your legal incorporation through adopting a corporate form like the Public Benefit Corporation, make that transition as soon as feasible. If your country hasn't already put in place a minimal voluntary stakeholder-based business models, work with your policymakers to make that a priority in the coming months. And advocate personally as a brand and in your community for a meaningful climate policy. Demand the kind of fundamental legislation we need to create a climate just future. Now I'll pass to Irvin.
Muito obrigado, Marcel, my friend. And hello, everyone. My name is Irvin Chan Gomez, and I'm both honored and humbled to be here with all of you today. By combining our three bold ambitions, rooted in people and justice, focused on action and advocacy, and amplified through partnerships and collaboration, the B Corp community is advancing a global transition to a zero-carbon regenerative economy. Underpinning our community's bold ambitions is a deep belief that with so little time, none of us can do this work alone. As Raj mentioned earlier, we need a fundamental mindset shift. This is true not only at a personal level or within our organizations, but also in how we work and collaborate with each other. The climate emergency demands radical collaboration and knowledge sharing, the likes of which we have not yet achieved. And as Charmian was reflecting on, what does this type of collaboration need to be rooted in for it to be radical? No different to the core of this work, our collaborations also need to be rooted around people. I think this is at the heart of the B Corp Climate Collective, a global and local network of climate leaders with over 2,000 active volunteers from around the world. This is a community of trust that is actively sharing and pooling knowledge to help equip B Corps and all businesses for climate action, justice and advocacy, and to accelerate the private sector's work to address the climate emergency. Moreover, we're also honored to be working next to partners like the UNFCCC, including the Marrakesh Partnership and the Race to Zero teams, TEDx Countdown, Oxford University and the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship, CERES, the Climate Collaborative, and many, many more friends and fellows and fellow travelers. And yet we need to continue growing and fostering this coalition for it to lead the way in our broader climate mobilization of the global B Corp community and beyond. So if you belong to any organization that is in the position to partner with us, please reach out. We want to work alongside you. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Irving. I'm Charlotte Sewell with the B Lab Global Climate Task Force. Last autumn, the B Corp Climate Collective, B Lab and Sistema B worked with one of our key partners, TEDx Countdown, to host a series of action parties where over 300 B Corp leaders around the world shared obstacles and solutions on their net zero journeys. You can find the amazing community advice and insights from these action parties in the chat. One of the biggest insights we heard was that companies didn't know where to go to find the resources they needed. So, in early 2021, we worked closely with the Oxford Net Zero team to create the B Climate Tools Base. This is an open source global library of tools to help businesses take action on climate, including achieving net zero and centering climate justice. It's all totally free and downloadable and includes toolkits, guides, case studies, webinars, and reports. And they're all smartly curated to make them easy to find. You can find it at the B Corp Climate Collective website /tools. You should also find a link in the chat. We've also worked in collaboration with the B Corp Climate Collective and other partners to create more than 10 free open source tools and resources on climate action, including the Climate Emergency Playbook for Business and the Climate Justice Playbook for Business version 1. So what's next? As you may know, the UN's next Conference of the Parties, or COP26, is scheduled to take place in Glasgow, in Scotland, this November. This meeting will be a critical moment in history for our species. There are two key things you can do to be part of our efforts for COP26. The first, as Dan said, is to commit to net zero by 2030 and get stuck into taking action. It's your action that will inspire greater ambition and action from other businesses. And second, you can take part in the brand new Boardroom 2030 initiative. This is an exciting opportunity for businesses to engage in how we might change the rules of the game. Any business of any size or location can take part by hosting a Boardroom 2030 conversation that imagines what their board might need to look like in order to meet the needs of 2030. You can use a Boardroom 2030 meeting to explore who's in the room, what's on the agenda, how does the board make decisions. These Boardroom 2030 activations will take place in October and November and will shine a light on the power of boards to bring about the 2030 future we need. You can find out more and how to join in the chat. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Charlotte. I'm Karen Lichtag with B Lab US and Canada and the B Corp Climate Collective. We all know that the challenges of this past year have been extreme. We've faced a global pandemic, the daily reminders of systemic racism, societal unrest, political division, and the devastating impacts of climate change. This upheaval is playing out in the daily headlines and on our doorsteps throughout the world. The challenges we face go beyond anything we've experienced to date. Yet human courage, determination, and ingenuity are vast and renewable resources. You have all been innovative and resilient in the face of this global pandemic. The world needs us to bring that kind of can-do innovation and focus to the climate emergency. All of our lives, the very survival of humanity, is at stake. So let's sum up some of the calls to action. Start by committing to achieving net zero emissions by 2030, or as fast as possible, and certainly no later than 2050. Center all of your work on climate in people and justice. Work to change the rules of the game in your companies and in your economies. Advocate for meaningful climate policy using your personal and your brand voice. Partner with others. Climate action is not about competition, but radical collaboration. We must share the knowledge and resources we have to get to a zero carbon future. One great place to start is to get active in the B Corp Climate Collective in your region. And if one doesn't exist, start one. Then do the work. This cannot and must not be about commitments alone. This is the time to act and to act now.
Thank you to all who shared that context. But even more, thank you to everyone who did the work that made that context necessary. So much has been done by the B Corp Climate Collectives and the Global Task Force to produce resources to make it easier for you to take action. So on the subject of action, let's talk about who's going to inspire us to action.
Thanks, Justin. I am now so honored to introduce an extraordinary leader of our time. He is a longtime climate champion and friend of the B Corp movement. He's also the co-founder of Sistema B International, and not least, the UN's high-level champion for climate action. Welcome, bienvenido, to Gonzalo Munoz.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be with all of you today. I'm, of course, speaking to you as a member of the B Corp community, as the United Nations High-Level Climate Action Champion, also as a co-founder of 2 B Corps that are directly and actively confronting the climate crisis, but also as a father of 3 girls that are now suffering of eco-anxiety. They not only question what they eat, how they dress, how they move, how they vote, they also question strongly if it were to become mothers. This might be happening to many of you also. For me, this seems to be no longer optional. The time is now for concrete action. We are in a race with time, a race to zero emissions. That's why we call the campaign Race to Zero, and it's designed to follow science. And net zero emissions is the objective, whether you achieve it in 2030, 2040, or 2050 at the very, very latest. And we need now to bring everyone into the race. Once in, we're checking that they are all running as fast as they can in order to get to the goal really as soon as possible. Then, of course, celebrate those leaders among the leaders that are running to get there even 20 years earlier in 2030. B Corps, you are the leaders, the pace setters. Thank you for the commitment. Thank you for positioning the goals in 2030. As many of you should know, we have set this ambition. Now it's about what we do. It's about concrete action on a daily basis, about the work we do in our value chain. It's about which climate we create once we purchase. It's about including this topic amongst the culture of our organization. It's about healthy skepticism on things like net zero. Sure, we have to debate, but keep pace setting and doing the work. For those of you that are not still part of the race to zero, get onto the journey. What are you waiting for? Today, you cannot wait any longer. Of course, we need to be honest, but keep the momentum. In the last year, we have seen a really strong progress regarding the Paris Agreement. I honestly think the glass is both half full and half empty. There's not enough ambition worldwide, but there are great examples happening. Honestly, our greatest risk is inaction. And of course, on the other side, expecting that someone else will do our job. If you're thinking about what else can you do, check the Race to Zero breakthroughs. 27 business sectors are now mapped in order to understand where they are, how they're moving. I really think B Corps must lead in each of the sectors and regions of the global economy. That's what the Race to Zero breakthroughs are for. Check also the Race to Resilience, with people in the center, a global campaign sibling to Race to Zero, designed to increase the resilience of 4 billion people, mostly in coastal zones, rural communities, and urban areas. We have to do the hard work of decarbonizing our economy, but can't run people over on that race. Justice must always be at the very center. Finally, understand that net zero is just an interim target towards regeneration. We're now seeing brilliant examples on how this is progressing worldwide. There are now more than $72 trillion as part of Race to Zero, forcing the investment to also get into the race and really bring action into that net zero and resilient world. And of course, celebrating when each of those investments join. One great example that I would love to share with all of you is a pension fund in Canada that joined Race to Zero through the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance in December last year. And a few weeks later, I started receiving calls from utilities in South America that received then this new obligation to join the race. Now we're starting to work also with their thousands of providers for them also to join the race. See the brilliant example. A pension fund in Canada is now activating thousands of SMEs in Latin America. Another great example, this representative of a major Asian car manufacturer in Uruguay. So they joined the Race to Zero, then they started pushing the other brand representatives in Latin America, and now we're having a conversation with the president of the organization in Asia for them also to join the Race to Zero. My friends, we at the B Corp community consider ourselves as purpose-driven business people. Well, climate action is no longer a purpose. It's a condition. It's a moral duty and should be part of all of our metrics of success from now on. Thank you very much. Let's keep on running.
Wow. Thank you, Gonzalo. That message was loud and clear. The race is on and we need to keep on running. Whew. What else do we have next, Justin?
And so now we have what will be a really inspiring conversation with a powerful global leader from the front lines of climate change, a youth climate activist, Mitzi Janelle Tan. And I cannot express to you the excitement I have for you all to be able to hear from Mitzi this really important and sobering message about our role as business and how we have to show up to be authentic partners.
When I was asked to do this speech, I wasn't sure how to start. The thing is, I believe so much in people's capacity to change for the better. But one thing I really hate is lying. When the lies start, it's hard because you don't know if change is happening. When the lies start, I would honestly rather reserve my energy for others who are more willing to listen and change. So why do I say this? I'm sure, as you all know, that there is so much greenwashing, or as a recent Guardian article put it, bullshitting from the private sector. And that makes it so hard to not just run away and decide not to talk to any of you at all. But I know there are different aspects of the private sector, and if I'm right, none of you here are the biggest polluters, and so maybe you can actually be talked to. But I'm not here to mince words. The climate crisis is a symptom of the system that has been built to be unjust, a system founded on oppression and injustice and colonialism and racism and sexism and human pain. And all for what? For profit. For the fantasy of everlasting growth on a planet that has limited resources. And if you think that we're running out of time, you're wrong. We're already out of time. My home, the Philippines, is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to the climate crisis. In the past 20 years, we have had the highest number of extreme weather events. I'm 23 years old. I was practically born into the climate crisis. Last year, the strongest storm landfall on recorded history hit the Philippines, and barely a week after that, another typhoon poured over a month's worth of rain in under 24 hours. I was on my way home when the typhoon came. I remember my mom called me and she told me, "Mitzi, don't come home because the roads to our house are flooded." I had to stay at a friend's place with no electricity for 3 days, not knowing if my mom was okay, if I would have a place to come home to. The floods in my city reached up to the second floor of buildings with over 12 meters or 40 feet high. People were stranded on their rooftops in an effort to survive. This is what it's like to live in the Philippines. Growing up, there were weeks that I had to do my homework by candlelight because of the raging typhoons outside, and I'm already one of the more privileged ones. So many have had it worse than I do. These typhoons have only been getting worse and worse. Growing up, we were frequently visited by the wails of the rushing wind, the heavy footsteps of rain, and the angry banging of thunder. The fear of typhoons and drowning in my own bedroom were constant companions. My climate anxiety, exacerbated by my climate trauma, consumes me. The climate crisis is here. We're already going through hell, and things will only get exponentially worse as business as usual practices continue and key players keep spewing out empty rhetoric and false promises. I have run out of words. I don't know how to stress enough that what we're doing now, especially the private sector and world leaders, is nowhere near enough. So I'll let the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scientists remind you. Just last week on the 23rd, some UN draft reports were leaked. What did it say? Species extinction, more widespread disease, unlivable heat, ecosystem collapse, cities menaced by rising seas. These and other devastating climate impacts are accelerating and bound to become painfully obvious before a child born today turns 30. That means less than 30 years from now. I'll let that sink in. Has it sunk in yet? Has it sunk in that major cities across the world will sink? That people will drown in floods even more than they already have today? On one side of the planet, you have people drowning from floods. On the other side of the planet, you have people dying of thirst. We need you to prioritize the people and the planet over profit. And I know some of you say you already do, but we need more. And we need you to help pressure the other private sectors, especially the biggest polluters, to do the same. When I say we, I don't just mean people from the Philippines or the global south, not just our generation of youth, but humanity, which you are part of. The richest elite have a debt to pay for the climate crisis that is happening to us. And when we are talking about climate action and justice, it means recognizing that countries and people least responsible for the crisis are the ones most impacted. So check your supply and distribution chains. Beyond sustainability, look at the rights of your workers and your partners' workers. Look at the brutality of how the materials are being extracted from our lands here in the global south for the profit of the global north. I know it's difficult, but I did say that the system was built to be unjust. And all this to say that Again, I'm assuming that none of you here are fossil fuel industries and non-essential plastic industries, because for those guys, my message is a lot clearer and more concise, and really it's just end the business. But for everyone else, remember that you changing your sustainability policies, the corporate social responsibility projects, the outreaches, the donations, the tree plantings, that won't solve the climate crisis. So now I'm not talking to you guys as members of the business community anymore. I'm talking to you guys as members of humanity. Join us. You need to join the people on the streets for systemic change. We need to come together and unite to get world leaders, especially from the global north, to put policies in place to stop emitting without leaving our workers and marginalized peoples behind. If you think that is too radical, let me remind you how I started this. I don't like lying, so here is the brutal, honest truth. If you think that is too radical, let me ask you, is it too radical to fight for a future worth living? Remember when the scientists just said, before a child today turns 30 years old, I'm not going to compromise and haggle for my life and my future and the lives and futures of future generations. We need change. Will you join us?
Thank you, Mitzi. I want to just give us all a minute to let that sink in. So just take a deep breath and take in Mitzi's question to us. It's a really vital challenge that we all as businesses have to look at. How will we join in this conversation? So that's where we want to go next. But first, because of where we are, we've been here an hour, we want to give you a break. So Mindy, tell us what's coming.
Yes, and you can continue to reflect on Mitzi and Gonzalo's questions to us as we do a short desk yoga break. So it's my honor to introduce the amazing Miriam from B Corp Office Yoga to take us through this short break. Hello, Miriam.
Thank you, Mindy, and thank you, Justin, for having me today. It's an honor to be here. And I do want to note that Gonzalo and Mitzi's speeches were very, very moving and empowering. And I don't know about you, but when I hear these things, I feel very emotional. And it's also hard for me to really stay within my body and focus on the task at hand, which is exactly what we need moving forward. It's easy to dissociate when we hear these sorts of stories. So what I want to work on with you today is a couple grounding poses that will prepare you for the conversation ahead. One thing I want to note before we do these poses is don't just use your body to get into the poses. Instead, use the poses to get into your body. Ground into your mind and your inner climate so that you're prepared for the conversation ahead. So let's start by scooting forward into our seats. I'll have you start seated. Go ahead and bring the right ankle over to the left knee. Create a nice figure four shape with your legs. And then lean forward, opening up into the outer right hip. You'll feel that opening right away, that release in the hips and the lower back region. And as you lean forward, just go ahead and take a nice easy twist over to the left. And then coming back to center, we'll change sides. Bring the left ankle over to the right knee. Feel the release in the outer left hip. The hips tend to carry emotional charge. So let that release go from the outer left hip. And then take an easy twist over to the right. You can hold the back of your chair or your seat handle for support. And releasing from that twist. Come to stand for just a moment. We'll do a balancing pose so that you feel grounded and ready for the conversation ahead. So starting with your feet right underneath your hips, bring your hands to your heart for a moment in mountain pose. Feel grounded and rooted through your legs. Feel strong through your feet. And then feel the hands pressed together. So this creates and establishes a midline for your body. From here, shift the weight into the right leg and hug the left knee into your chest. Open the left leg to the left and bring the foot to the inner thigh. If you need to hold on to a desk or a chair for support, you can go ahead and do so. Otherwise, bring the hands to your heart. Nice, Justin. You got it. And then circle the arms all the way around, acknowledging that this is a collective effort. And then bring the hands into your heart, recognizing that you are a part of this. Bring the left foot down, and we'll change sides, shifting over. Hug the right knee to your chest. Open the right leg out to the right. Press the foot and thigh into each other. And then find your midline with the hands together at the heart. Circle the arms around, recognizing the collective. And then bringing the hands back in towards center, acknowledging that you have an important role in this. And placing the feet back down, and just taking a final moment, connecting with your inner climate so that you're in better position to deal with the global climate. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your time. Justin, Mindy, back to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And I love acknowledging the collective and bringing it all together, and also managing our inner climate in order to face the outer climate. So much I got from that. How do you feel, Justin?
I feel amazing, although I will say suits are not the best for yoga. So I'll need to do a little more stretching once I can change into normal clothing again. But I do think that prepared us really well for the conversation we're about to have, which is to say, how do we start to have authentic relationships and do real work as businesses around climate justice? And one of the key things in that is that we have to be in relationship with the people actually doing the work and the people most affected. And that's going to require us to be uncomfortable. So how do we do that well? What does that look like? And so Dr. Alonda Williams from B Lab Global and Dan Eagle from Inclusion Network are going to lead a conversation with climate justice leaders right now on this subject. And so I'll pass it to Dr. Alonda Williams and Dan Eagle to guide us through this.
Thank you so much, Justin, and welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening in the United States and in the morning and afternoon where you may find yourselves. We are incredibly fortunate to be joined by an incredible panel of folks as we talk about the importance of proximity and lived experience and hearing from voices very intentionally that for whatever reason may have not been in the center of these conversations, but certainly should be. And so it's with that intention in mind that we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by an amazing lineup of speakers from around the globe who bring really deep and nuanced lived and learned experience to this conversation. And so those folks whose names I will share with you will be joining us just momentarily. And their names are Rene Calpanche, who we had the wonderful gift of his land acknowledgement to kick us off this evening. He's joining us from Argentina and is an Atacameño grandfather and the co-creator and president of the System of Indigenous Peoples. We're joined by Marita Davies, an author and storyteller, joining us from Australia. David Chen, the chief operating officer of a fellow B Corp of Golden Sunland, and Takoria Jackson, a climate activist in the United States. And this is actually the part 2 of a conversation that we began a few weeks ago. And that conversation was recorded and is now placed on YouTube. So if you have a chance to take a look, we'd certainly encourage you to hear from them. And that conversation really centered around 4 questions that I've now put into the chat, just to give you some grounding context of what were the questions we discussed? What was that initial conversation about? And we were really thinking about what can B corporations, what can the business community do, and what haven't we perhaps touched on just yet that we need to? And so with this conversation tonight, I just a quick note of housekeeping. We have about a half hour's worth of time to hear from these incredible leaders. Lore, who did the interpretation of Renee's beautiful land acknowledgement, will also be live interpreting from Spanish into English. So when Renee has a chance to contribute to the conversation, we'll actually hear from him first in Spanish, and then we'll hear his words translated back for us into English. And so with that, I want to turn things over really quickly to Dr. Yolanda Williams in case there's anything else that I've missed or that you want to make sure we touch on before we kick things off.
Nothing that was missed. I'm really excited to be having this conversation. I like to make it think like, you know how like we really want to build relationship and build conversation, and we don't want to be speaking for others. We want to create space and invite others to have the conversation. And so that's what this second conversation is about. And that's what it's rooted in. It's rooted in justice and the idea that we can have conversation, but we really want to make sure that that conversation is robust and rich and diverse and inclusive. So we are super excited to have our special guest with us this evening, and hopefully we'll all be learning and growing. Every time I hear from individuals like those on the panel, I learn and I grow myself. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Thanks, Dan.
Yes. Thank you. So to kick us off for tonight, and I should also mention that we would warmly welcome any questions in the chat, particularly those about climate justice. So we'll have some time for the panelists to answer some predetermined questions, but then certainly want to hear from you as well. So please put those not in the chat, my apologies, into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen if there's things you'd like to ask about climate justice. And so with that, panelists, welcome back. I'm so excited to have this part 2 of our conversation. Our first question is to actually anchor back on our first, which is really thinking about, was there anything particularly in the actions that businesses can take that you wanted to explore further or perhaps think about differently now that we have this opportunity? And David, I'd like to turn things over to you first to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. So this is David dialing in from Singapore. It's morning time, so the little one's awake. Just to establish some context, I'm the co-founder of a B Corp that works with the smallholder rice farmers in Myanmar to produce rice in a more sustainable way. So I spent the last 15 years working on rice. So I kind of see everything through the lens of this very humble staple. And the fact is, rice is actually fairly complex. The rice farmers are both victims and contributors. Sorry, so I was saying that the rice farmers are actually both victims and contributors of climate change. Yet, most of them actually do not have the mind space to think about long-term sustainability due to poverty. And the consumers of rice are mostly disconnected from the producers. So they don't really understand the resource that's required for rice production. And therefore, they're most likely to waste rice, therefore leading to latent carbon emissions. So we are... When Dan first reached out, I said, we're preaching to the choir today, right? Everyone here, I believe, understand the definition and importance of climate justice. But what can we do to reach out to those who are unaware that they are part of the problem? The challenge is really to deliver a message that articulates the gravity of the issue without sounding like we are preaching. And I personally think that the word justice does sound a little bit strong because, well, this is not the first time I heard Missy's piece, but it still gives me goosebumps. It is a message that came from someone who personally faced the effect of climate change. But however, no matter how much empathy one has, we will never experience the same impact from reading about it or hearing it. It is just like how my wife may actually give birth anytime since last night, but I'm pretty chill about it because I know that it's a painful process, but I don't experience it myself. What I'm trying to say is to drive climate justice, we actually really need massive buy-in from the majority. And the reality is there are certain things that we know. We either care about it or we don't, or perhaps we have harsher realities facing us, taking away mind space and resources to care. To give a real example, how do we craft a meaningful narrative about climate change or climate justice to a smallholder farmers who can't make ends meet? I mean, sure, the last drought was devastating and they probably knew that it was perhaps their collective doing while producing food for consumers they have never met. So what can we do to help them in a rather holistic manner to achieve sustainable production? And there are also things that we know that we don't know, right? And the final domain, there are things that we don't know that we don't know. For this particular group, let's make education our purpose. poverty is not just about dollars and cents. It also refers to the massive knowledge gap that we have in the market. So most of the consumers are like frogs in boiling water, right? They are in trouble, but they're unaware. And B Corp's principle is really to balance profit and purpose. So I would really like to take this opportunity to deep dive into B Corp's role in not just being advocates, but also practitioners on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, David, so much for kicking us off. I'm wondering if other panelists have thoughts, either based on what David has shared or other thoughts since our last conversation you'd like to bring to the conversation. Yeah, Marita, please.
I might jump in. Just hearing David speak, I'm based in Australia and I'm Australian, but I'm also i Kiribati, which means that I'm from the Indigenous lands of Kiribati in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Pardon me. And the state, like Mitzi's, the climate situation in Kiribati is incredibly desperate, and it's absolutely urgent for action to be taken. However, as an Kiribati person and also someone who has written about climate change quite a lot and in different capacities, I'm climate change fatigued, and I can imagine a lot of other people are, because it is turned in from, for me, it's felt like it's turned from a action word, climate change, and we need to be doing something about that, to something that is starting political debates, and then it starts to go into how we're divided on opinions, and that's just not something that I just want to engage in anymore. I don't want to be, as soon as I mention climate change in Kiribati, I don't want to be talking about politics. And so, which is why I've changed to advocating stories. And that's what I see as my role as an Kiribati person, especially based in Australia, is that it's my job to be sharing stories from Kiribati to a wider Western audience that I can reach. I see that's my privilege, and so that's what I need to be working with. In terms of action, I think businesses really need to be honest on what that action is. They need to be really honest on the narrative that they want to be saying for themselves, not just what's popular at the moment, and really be specific on what action you can actually take. And I would always say the very, very first thing that you must be doing is engaging with the Indigenous people of the land that you're on, because their environmental knowledge is just so untapped still, which is crazy to me. But I would go there first, seek their experience, seek their knowledge, pay for their knowledge, and start there and figure out how you can start elevating their stories. That's what I just wanted to contribute to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Marita. So much importance in what you shared. To Corey or Renee, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I don't want to cut off Renee if he was going to try to speak, but yeah, please. I just wanted to add kind of like,
I was just saying, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, my experience is a little bit different since I kind of like got into the environmental space from kind of like my own kind of, I wanted to take personal accountability for the impact that I was having. And that's what kind of like catapulted me into a lot of the work that I've been doing in the climate justice space. So for me, a lot of the work that I've been doing in like my local community and specifically in like Howard County here in Maryland is more so just about the intersectionalities between these climate crises and how they and the impact across like race and class, and how that's been personified in the communities that I directly interact in, whether that be home weatherization, the disparities from urban tree cover, electrical vehicle access, or a lot of people are suffering from food deserts, or rather food insecurity. So for me, when I was thinking about this kind of like conversation about how businesses can understand the role that they play, specifically, I've been like on a lot of committees where we're always talking about redevelopments and which businesses are going to be able to like have their businesses here or there, or how we can maybe like redevelop areas to make it more equitable and sustainable and create more green jobs. So I kind of wanted to add to the conversation the advantage of potentially leaning in on more community benefit agreements between a lot of these businesses that are coming into communities. And kind of like more so, I would say like internal education and awareness of climate justice issues within their own companies as well. Because if the people within your company don't even know the impact that they're having on the communities around them, then how are you even going to justify any type of like changes or community engagement opportunity on? And I think that a lot of people don't understand, and I think a lot of businesses don't leverage the power that they have in those community benefit agreements, because ultimately they're coming in to provide something for that community, and they can most definitely have a list of demands or a list of kind of like negotiations on what they can provide, or what infrastructures can be set in place as an agreement for them having their business there or in those communities, whether that be increasing the infrastructure around access to fresh produce for those surrounding communities, whether it's taking part in like the climate action plans that happen in those counties for any communities that might be adjacent to like any runoff or any waste that their facilities might produce. There's a lot of ways that the community and these businesses can collaborate and interact with each other. But more often than not, and what my experience has been especially, is that these conversations are most definitely happening. But again, the people that are impacted by it are left out of those spaces, even though they're supposed to be public spaces where everybody should have access to and should be able to contribute. So that's kind of just like my piece that I wanted to add to the conversation, and just letting people know that these spaces do exist for you to share and voice your concerns, and possibly create better arrangements when it comes to like businesses impacting you, impacting your community, or even just impacting the overall climate in which you live in. And yeah, I just think that communities should leverage that a little bit more, and businesses should take more accountability and responsibility, and be a little bit more intentional about thinking about the benefit of those communities when they are entering those communities.
Thank you so much, Decoria. I see that we have a question in the chat, but before we get there, I would love to open the floor to Renee to provide some thoughts on this initial question.
Bueno, creo que los panelistas se han encargado de desarrollar con total claridad que el problema es grave y urgente. Nuestros abuelos en el campo nos han enseñado, cuando hay un problema grave y urgente, ¿qué hacer? Lo simple y lo importante. ¿Y qué es lo simple y lo importante? Primero, ¿quiénes formamos parte de esa carrera en la que estamos para tratar de buscar una solución y lograr carbono cero en el 2030? ¿Es responsabilidad solo de los que conocen el tema o es responsabilidad de todos? Y para eso tenemos que empezar a hacer cosas diferentes, porque haciendo lo mismo, los resultados de lo que estamos viviendo hoy. Entonces nos hagamos cargo del tiempo y el espacio. Por lo tanto, no solamente tenemos que pensar, sino tenemos que empezar a sentir. Eso es lo simple que podemos hacer todos. Empezar a sentir qué debemos hacer en este momento para unirnos a esa carrera. ¿Y qué es lo simple? Despertar el corazón, porque eso lo podemos hacer todos, no hace falta tener títulos para eso. Cambiar la forma de producir y de consumir. Y ahí le estamos dando la respuesta a David. También le estamos dando la respuesta a Ticoria. Entonces tenemos que cambiar los modelos y eso lo debemos hacer todos. No solamente el desarrollo filosófico que nos ha llevado del siento y luego existo, sino también nosotros de los pueblos indígenas sin resentimiento. Ahora podemos aportar a esa nueva comunidad humana que tenemos que co-crear entre todos, la amáutica, que es lo que nos une desde el corazón a la tierra, a los demás seres, al cosmos. Eso que no podemos teorizar, pero que sabemos que existe y que tenemos que regenerar la armonía en la naturaleza. Creo que ahora tenemos que ponernos a trabajar todos y para eso olvidarnos de los resentimientos. Nosotros de los pueblos indígenas decidimos reinventarnos y pedir perdón al mundo por haber estado en silencio por tanto tiempo. Ahora podemos aportar ¿qué? Las experiencias, en el caso nuestro los atacameños, de haber administrado lo escaso en el lugar más árido del mundo, donde de verdad se siente. Ahora nosotros sentimos ya la sequía que está produciendo el cambio climático. Entonces son cosas que no tiene que borrarnos la alegría, sino que tenemos que, con felicidad, con amor, hacernos cargo de la responsabilidad. Para eso nos debemos reencontrar y eso significa lo holístico, eso significa recuperar la armonía, eso significa recuperar el cuidado, no solamente con el sentido filosófico, sino también con el sentido amáutico, que significa qué hacemos nosotros ya, ahora, en este momento, no solo por nosotros, sino por nuestros hijos, porque de lo contrario, ¿qué le decimos a David con el bebé que tiene en el brazo? ¿Cuál va a ser la respuesta? ¿Solo teorización? ¿Esperar que otros hagan? ¿O solo lo que tienen poder? Sino armonizar. Creo que ahora el desafío es la regeneración. Para eso tenemos que producir una transformación en la forma de producir, una transformación en las políticas públicas y fundamentalmente una transformación en las costumbres de todas las comunidades para aportar y cumplir con ese sueño, que ya no es una opción, hoy es una obligación. Así que este es un pedido de que todos nos movilicemos. Primero escuchemos el corazón, ¿qué nos dice? ¿Qué tenemos que hacer ya en estos momentos? Segundo, no reneguemos con lo que hemos aprendido tanto, desaprendamos un poco y lo transformemos en el cambio, pero los cambios siempre de adentro hacia afuera, para cambiar el ser. Cuando cambiamos el ser, vamos a cambiar el hacer. Y eso es lo que nos va a permitir hacer realidad ese sueño en el 2030. Pero no esperemos de los salvadores, sino que es responsabilidad de todos nosotros. Nos tocó en la historia hacernos cargo de este tiempo y de este espacio.
Thank you, Renee. We're now going to hear Lore's interpretation of your contribution.
Well, I believe that the panelists have developed clearly that this is an urgent and serious problem. Our grandparents in the fields show us when there is a problem, we need to focus on the simple and on the important. So what is simple and what is important when we're talking about climate change? First, we need to think about who belongs in this race to accomplish zero net emissions in 2030. It is the responsibility of those who know, or of all of us, that we need to do something. We all know that we need to do something different because doing the same is how we got here today. So we need to do things differently. We not only have to think, but we need to feel. This is the simple thing we can all do. This is a simple thing we can all do. Feel what we have to do and join this race. What is the simple action then? To awaken our hearts, which is something that we can all do. Change our productions, change how we consume. And I think this is the answer also for David and Tikoria. We need to change how we feel, how we produce, and how we consume. We need to change the models, all of us, not only related to philosophical development, but also coming from indigenous communities. Without resentment, we can co-create a new community that join us from the heart to the earth and to the others and the cosmos. Those feelings we cannot theorize, but we know that they exist. We need to regenerate nature and forget resentments. From indigenous peoples, we are reinventing and asking forgiveness to all of you for our silence. But now we can give our experience. We're sharing our experiences. In my case, we're sharing our experiences of administering the scars in the most arid place in the world. Right now, we are already feeling the drought here in the Atacama region, but we should not let this erase our happiness. And we also need to take responsibility with happiness. We need to come together holistically, recovering harmony and care, not just from the philosophical, but from the point of view of what we're doing for ourselves and for our children. If not, what are we going to say to David's child? Are we going to wait for others to act? The challenge now is regeneration, for which we need to transform how we produce and transform public policies, and also transform our customs and the way that we live in order to fulfill this dream, which is no longer an option, but an obligation. This is a call to make sure that we all mobilize. First, listening to our hearts about what we need to do now, and then let's unlearn the things that have brought us here today and transform these things into change from the inside out. When we change the self, we change how we act. And that is what is going to make this dream come true. We cannot wait for saviors. It is our time and it is our responsibility to enact this change today.
Thank you, Lore, and thank you, Renee. This was so powerful and so important for us to hear. I want to be mindful of time. I know that we have about 6 minutes or so left. And so for a question that was put into the chat by one of our participants here, the question's about future generations. What would you say to those who will continue to inherit the challenges of climate change and climate injustice? And is there anything sort of advice or thoughts you would give to those who are coming next? And we probably have time for one or two folks to answer that question before we do a round of closeout comments.
I think something that has been empowering for me in this space, especially when you're first coming into it and it's almost like, oh my God, it's like the end of the world is happening. And it's really easy to fall into this space where you're just kind of like helpless and hopeless. But something that has been empowering for me and something that I have already seen in a lot of the youth in my community, and it's continued to inspire me and make me hopeful, is doing what you can on a local level. Because once you start there, then you can start to impact maybe the next city, the next county over, and inspire change on a level like that, because we may not have the access, the power, or the potential to tackle these issues at the very root or at the very top or the very core. But if we take control over our communities and take control over the practices that we have in our communities that are impending on our environment and our planet, then we can start the change that way and build up that momentum so that we can work in tandem with the people that maybe do have access to those spaces at the top that we don't. So that's what I would say to younger generations that are coming up and maybe just don't know where to start.
Thank you, Tikoria. In the interest of time, I want to make sure everyone has a chance to just close out. And because of time, would really like us to keep this as short and sweet as possible. So David, I'm going to come back to you and we'll do one final closeout round.
So apologies for the renovation. I think that the challenge for us and call to action for everyone really is to turn around and look at a kid at a home and try to explain to them what climate justice is, because it's a challenge. Right. She was asking me what everyone was talking about just now, and I find it difficult. And if we can't get this message to the next generation in a way that they understand, it's really difficult for them to take over the world that we're living in. So this just some thought from me.
Thank you, David. Marita, can we go to you next?
Yeah, I have two small children, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I've also written a children's book on climate change and living with that in Kiribati. And I'm very fortunate to have I get invited to schools to explain to them this book. The book doesn't mention climate change whatsoever. It doesn't mention environment. It just talks about trying to save your home when high tide arrives and trying to protect it from rising oceans. And I can just say that the younger generation get it. Start the conversation early. Start the conversation on what the environment is that you're living in now. And I'm speaking about young sort of primary school age kids, but start the conversation really young, just because they understand it and they will grow up with the value of that has to be a top priority in the world that they live in. They'll grab it.
Thank you, Marita. Takoria, final thoughts.
Yeah, just honestly echoing what everyone says. I've been tremendously impressed with the power that the youth and this younger generation has, and their willingness to really want to hit the ground running and get involved in these climate issues. So yeah, I completely agree with Marita. Like we just have to start the conversation and not undermine their intelligence or their understanding, because they know what's happening, and it's up to us to kind of give them that access and give them the tools to be able to take that next step, and so we can effectively pass that torch on. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And Renee, with our last minute, would love to turn things to you.
El poder colectivo es exponencial, es armónico y es equilibrado. Y ese poder lo tenemos que ejercer y hacernos cargo desde el amor, porque el que ama, cuida, y el que cuida es feliz. Y para ser feliz, creo que tenemos que animar, nunca perder el humor, pero animarnos a ser disruptivos, para escuchar a lo que nos dice el corazón que debemos hacer hoy. Y con eso vamos a lograr el carbono cero.
The collective power is exponential, is harmony, and has equilibrium. And we need to act in this power from love. That who loves takes care, and that who takes care is happy. And to be happy, we need to not lose our humor and be disruptive and do what our hearts tell us to do. That's how we're going to reach net zero emissions.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for your time, your care, the gift of your experience, and for being here with us today. I wish we had more time, but I'm going to have to turn things over to Justin and just want to close things out with a note of gratitude to each of you for your time today.
Thank you all so much. It's really wonderful. I got to watch your previous conversation and found it inspiring, and really grateful for what came out of today. And I think a couple key lessons that I'm taking from this are, first, that it's so important to start by listening and by actually having real conversation, rather than assuming that we know or just jumping in with whatever you think is right. Is that first conversation is to listen, and to listen to the people who are there really living it, who've been there living it for thousands of years. Also, I think there's something Takoria raised, which is really important, which is all work starts local. And so even if it's a little thing that you can do, think about what you can do where you are. And a couple other things that struck me. David talked about how when you can't put food on the table, you're not worried about climate change. Even if you're worried about climate change, when we are partnering, we have to say, what is proximal for the people we're working with? And let's solve that in a context that, as Marita said, isn't politicizing, isn't making this into something that is bigger than what we can take on, because all of a sudden it's pitting us against each other. Because as René said, el poder colectivo es exponencial. Collective power is exponential. So we have to find a way to bring this together. So grateful for all of that wisdom and so much more that is still percolating. And with that, let's turn to what's next.
Thank you, Justin, for that summary, and to Dan and Alonda and all the panelists on that last session. We've gone through lots today. We heard from Gonzalo, from Mitzi, and now we're going to bring it all together. And so we're going to invite two really important people who are foundational to the design and the success of this event, Kim Kupanas and Dr. Alonda Williams, who will come back to reflect and summarize our day today. So welcome back, Kim.
Thank you, Mindy.
All right. So now it's time to say thank you. Now it's time to take a moment and think about how we got here, why we got here, and all of the hard work that we've all done. We were really intentional this year, and I'm super proud of all the work that we've done. So first, we just want to say thank you to our sponsors, our partners. We really want to thank our incredible climate justice leaders, right? Those of you who have shown up with listening ears, ready to listen and hear the messages that were shared from our panelists, especially. Thank you for the event. Thank you for your wisdom and inspiration. And most importantly for me, thank you for your honesty, as Mitzi mentioned. The honesty that you brought and the empathy and love that came behind the messages that you sent, I felt really is important to drive us all towards growth and development. I'm incredibly proud of us. We fulfilled our commitment, in my opinion, to make sure that we ran an inclusive event. And I hope that we all now feel really energized and excited to beginning to have different ways of thinking about the climate change conversation and how do we embed justice into that conversation so that they're really not two separate conversations. So that this is the way that the work that is happening now is the way that we are going to be doing the work in the future, in a way that embeds justice and really creates opportunities for voices to come together to collectively find solutions to the problems that some of us are more negatively impacted than others. So we're excited, and we are most importantly grateful for all of you coming to have the conversation, but most importantly, the individuals that helped us put it all together.
Beautifully said, Alonda. Thank you so much. And I want to especially call out some of the amazing companies who've contributed to the production of this event. Habitus Incorporated, that's the company that Justin runs. It's absolutely amazing. Happily, who's been doing the background tech, incredible company. Mas Verde, who created the video that we saw at the very beginning of our gathering tonight. Miss Stelly, who did the beautiful artwork. Latin Lingua, who's done the amazing translations, and Office Yoga, Miriam, and the amazing yoga, and Playing for Change you'll get to hear at the end of the event. Again, this event wouldn't have been possible without the support of our event sponsors. We want to give special shout out again to our premier sponsors, Danone North America, Natura & Co., Gerdau, Happily, and Dr. Bronner's. And we'd also like to thank by name the amazing sponsors who also made this event possible: the Business Development Bank of Canada, Taos Ski Valley, Participant Media, Conscious Capitalism Florida, Climate Positive, Mustela, 3 Degrees, Pure Strategies, Native Energy, Latin Lingua, 2040, and many regional sponsors and contributors who've really enabled this event to come to life. We're incredibly grateful to you for all you've done. And folks, there are literally hundreds of people around the world who have poured their heart's passion, vision into this event. Each of the 8 regional events that are spread across the next 2 days have their own event planning committees. In Africa, we have Trevor Combo and his team. In Asia, Corey Lien, Kino Rodriguez, Jennifer Kuo and their team. In Australia and New Zealand, Mindy Liao, Kira Day and their team. In Brazil, Francine Limos, Daniela Larario, Lara Martins and their team. In Europe, Yaliz Merritt, Daniel Turan, Helena Bergosova and their team. In Latin America, Paula Alzualde and her team. In the UK, Kate Sandel, Catherine Draper and their team. And in my market, the US and Canada, Justin Wright, Kelsey Summer-Roy, Karen Lichtig and Rose Lavelle and their amazing team, ginormous team at the end here. Thank you all for everything you're doing to bring this powerful 3 days together. You're amazing. And lastly, I want to pay special attention and do special call out for a really dedicated group of professionals who've been driving the global aspects of the summit for over 6 months. The members of the Global Climate Summit planning team, the incomparable Dr. Yolanda Williams, Rose Lavelle, Helena Bogosova, Dan Eagle, Kelsa Summer-Voigt, Paula Oswalde, Mindy Liao, and my sister climate warrior, co-convener and partner, Charmian Love. You're all so amazing, and what an honor and privilege it's been to work with you these many good months. I want to particularly mention 3 people: our heroic summit project lead, Karen Lichtig, Charlotte Sewell, who's an incredible strategic advisor and contributor to all of this climate work and throughout the creation of this event, and Justin, you're an amazing friend, and you've been an incredible lead facilitator throughout this 6 months. An amazing MC and my awesome partner in this work since 2018. Folks, you can't even imagine all the little gems that are woven into this event, thanks to the tireless visionary work of all of these people, thanks to all of these planning teams, and especially thanks to you, Karen, Charlotte, and Justin. So friends, our generous sponsors have enabled this event to be the welcoming and inclusive experience it's hopefully been for you, and you heard a little bit about that from Yolanda. They have enabled it to be 100% free and open to all, with inclusive tech options and amazing climate justice speakers that you've heard from. The event has also been made possible by countless donated hours from B Lab and Sistema B personnel around the world and B Corp volunteers around the world. So B Lab, the nonprofit behind Certified B Corps, is funded globally by B Corp certification fees, but just over 50% of our funding comes from gifts from generous philanthropic partners around the world. And these gifts are what make it possible for us, this little engine that could, this little nonprofit, to scale things like the collective action of our community on critical issues like climate change. So if you were moved or inspired by the session today, and if you're looking forward to the programming over the next few days, please consider making a charitable donation to support B Lab. By working together to shift the culture of business, we can help solve some of the world's biggest environmental and social challenges. You can make a gift at the website linked on the slide as well as in the chat. Thank you so much for your support. Back to you, Yolanda.
And so maybe we didn't solve climate justice right today. Maybe we didn't solve the climate change conversation right today on this call, but the hope is that we've sparked your interest. The hope is that we've sparked your thinking, right? The hope is that we've made you question, right? Lean into your curiosities around the why. Why are things the way that they are? Ask yourself questions. Encourage your teams to ask questions. I really appreciate us getting the ball rolling on changing our perspectives, but the work is now for you. The work now continues with each and every one of you. And we hope that you've experienced over these past 2 hours some inspiration, that you've experienced not only change in your thought, but you're inspired to act upon that change. You're inspired to think a little bit differently about your individual role in solving the climate emergency and our collective work together. And that together we're going to be working to find solutions that we need to develop, share, and accelerate together that do no harm for anyone, especially to those who have generationally already experienced so much trauma at the hands of others.
Amen to that. Amen. Back over to you, Mindy and Justin. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Yolanda and Kim, for all those beautiful words. And I especially want to spotlight Kim, who thanked so many people earlier, and I'm sure I can absolutely speak for all of them in sending gratitude and love back to you, Kim. So if you're in the audience today, I'm sure you would have worked with Kim and know what she's like. Please show her some love in the chat as well for everything that you do. Your work has been instrumental in every aspect of our climate action work at B Lab, and on behalf of Shah as well, who can't be here. We love you. Thank you. So for me personally, I've taken so much from the last hour and a bit. And what's emerging for me is something that David and Mitzi said. And David said that we B Corps need to really think about our role as practitioners as well as being activists, as being advocates. And that really connects with Mitzi's call to action that we need to join people on the streets to fight for a future worth living. And so that's really coming up really strong for me. And it's inspired me to go to the session that Shamin Love is organizing as part of the B Corp Climate Collective in the UK around being an activist business. So that's one of the sessions that I've earmarked. The conversation is also happening with Natura, Ecosia, and Finisterre. What about you, Justin? What sessions have caught your eye?
So I am getting to be part of the sessions for US and Canada tomorrow. And that region is doing a big chunk of work together because US and Canada has done a bunch of work over the last several years. We're in a place where we want to push people to make commitments. So we have 4 sessions, but it's actually 1 session with breaks in the middle. And we're going to put people together with buddies to really figure out how do we commit together to do our action locally. I'm so excited. And I hope to see anyone who's in the US and Canada region there tomorrow.
Yes, and there are 70 sessions. The link has just been popped in the chat again. If you haven't had a look, please go there, select your time zone. But don't go yet because we've got 2 more things in store for you. Coming up next is networking time. So our networking space will be open shortly and we will give you an orientation on how to navigate this space shortly. And we also want to give you a little preview and get you all excited about these regional gatherings. So we're going to play a few videos to give you a flavor of the different people behind these sessions, as well as the content that we have to choose from. It's going to be tough picking which one to go to. So if our tech team is ready, we can roll those videos.
Hi everyone, my name is Trevor Combo from B Lab East Africa here in Kenya, and we're excited to be running an Africa regional gathering at the Climate Summit. And we'll be discussing the role of businesses in addressing climate change in Africa, as well as seeing how youth and businesses can come together to fight and mitigate climate change here in Africa. We can't wait to see you there. You can find the links to register both in SCED and on the chat right now. And as a great follow-up, B Lab East Africa will be running a major crowdfunding campaign to aid the growth of more sustainable businesses who are working to mitigate climate change in Africa. You can learn more on the link in the chat box now.
Hello, I'm Sartika at B Corp's 24 Slides from B Climate Collective Asia Task Force. We're so excited to be hosting the Asia Regional Gathering as part of the Climate Summit.
We have an incredible program lined up to help advance our community's work on climate. How to cultivate change in Asian consumers, how to build up consensus in an Asian company, and the innovation that is happening now for climate justice.
These are the wonderful people that put together this program for you. 44% of carbon emission come from Asia. We need to do our part for our planet's climate neutrality. Please be here. We need each other to create this change together. Register at the link below.
Hello and kia ora. I'm Mindy Liao, the head of community building at B Lab Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. The B Corp Climate Collective in this region is so excited to be hosting an interactive workshop called Save the Date, Planning for Net Zero. Hosted by B Corp climate leaders in our region, this workshop is open to any organizations at any point of their net zero journey. Our aim is for you to walk away with practical action items that you can implement for your company to take its next step towards net zero. We can't wait to see you. Find the link in SHED to register or in the chat now.
Hi, I'm Francine Lemos, Executive Director of Sistema B Brazil. I'm very excited to be hosting the Brazilian regional event as part of the Climate Summit. We have an incredible program lined up to support the B Corp community here to advance on climate. Some of the highlights, we are going to discuss the next steps after signing the net zero commitment, and also an incredible chat with Brazilian experts regarding Amazonia, and much, much more. Hope to see you there. You can sign up both on the chat here or on the sketch. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Hola. Hello.
Bonjour.
Hello from us all in Europe. I'm Yeliz Mert, Counterpartner Manager of B Lab Europe. Tomorrow at the European Regional Gathering of the B Corp Climate Summit, we will hear from numerous B Corps sharing their first-hand experience on climate action. We will also tune into European net zero experts to learn about the evolving questions on the topic, and we will launch our interdependence coalition shaping public policy at a pan-European level. There's more. Come join us there.
Hola, mi nombre es Paula Elzualde y soy responsable de articulación de la red para Sistema B Internacional y del colectivo de clima para América Latina. Es una alegría darles la bienvenida a la Cumbre de Clima. Tenemos una agenda preparada de contenidos muy interesante. Para el día 2 de la cumbre, que es el 30 de junio, tenemos un panel alineado con los Climate Champions de Naciones Unidas, siguiendo la línea de las 4P. El primer panel será de prometer, el segundo panel de planificar, el tercero proceder y el cuarto publicar. El día 3 de la cumbre, que es el 1 de julio, tendremos paneles temáticos diversos, ganadería regenerativa, upcycling y workshops bien prácticos para ayudarte en tu camino, en el camino de tu empresa, hacia las emisiones cero neto en el año 2030. Te esperamos en la cumbre. Y para acceder al registro o al programa podés ir directamente a SCED o acá mismo en el chat. Te esperamos.
Hello, I'm Catherine Draper, the Community and Programmes Coordinator at B Lab UK. We're so excited for our UK regional sessions tomorrow, and we've got such an incredible programme lined up. We've got sessions on how to become an activist business, how to measure your digital footprint, and how to take meaningful climate action in your local community. We can't wait to see you there. You can find the link to register both in Shed and in the chat right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Heim from the Business Development Bank of Canada, coming to you from the B Corp Climate Collective in Canada and the United States. We are so excited to be hosting a US-Canada regional gathering as part of Day 2. It's going to be amazing. Whether you're new or familiar to this work, our focus will be on working together with all of you to make concrete commitments and wrestle with tough challenges. We'll hear from climate justice advocates from Canada and the US, as well as action group leaders from the US-Canada B Corp Climate Collective, including appearances from 2 very special musical artists. It's been such a privilege for me and for BDC to be one of the early supporters of this work, and we can't wait to take it to the next level during the summit and at the US-Canada regional event. We are so excited to see you there. You can find the links to register in the chat right now. Thank you so much.
Amazing. So this brings us to the end. This has been an awesome, awesome gathering. We're so grateful for you all being here. And this is the time when we're going to have a chance to gather. So the things you need to do are, 1, figure out what regional gatherings you're going to go to. And also think about Day 3. Mindy, you want to say a bit about that?
Yes. If you haven't noticed already, Day 3 is jam-packed with wonderful sessions, workshops, webinars, and films from all over the B Corp community around the world. So Shed or Sked is your place to go. Shed or Shed, depending on how you say schedule or schedule. Both are right. Pick the sessions in your local time, and we'll see you there.
Awesome. So now we're going to close. And after, we'll play a little music to wind us out from an amazing B Corp that Mindy will introduce. But before we do, after the music, there'll be a place for you to actually gather and talk to each other, because this whole time you've only been able to chat and ask questions. This was set up by our team. It's an awesome place that you can gather. It's called Kumo Space. So we're going to show a little video so you understand how it works, because it's a little bizarre if you've never been in one of these virtual hangout spaces before. And then we're going to also throw the link in the chat. When the music is done, we'll all head over there who want to, and we'll see you there and connect and can talk. So if you want to roll the video with the explanation from Karen, and then we'll hear some music.
Hey everyone. Welcome to Kumo Space. This is free easy to use Start at kumospace.com/comment. Inside the space by creating an account or simply click continue without an account. Then enter your name, make sure your audio and your video are working, and click join. Next, you'll select a room where you want to join. We have many room options named by language, so you can connect with people who speak the same language you do. I'm going to head to our B Corp VIP room. Here we are in the Kumo space. Here are the main things that you need to know. Use the arrow keys to move around. Oh, hey, Justin. How's it going? Hey, how's it going? Great. Alternatively, good to see you too. You can also click to move around. Explore the space. One setting you may want to change is play sound when someone enters the room, so you can turn off the doorbell that plays when people come in. If you want to talk to someone, make sure that they're nearby in the visible circle. Clicking the map will show you the lay of the land of this room. If you want to select a different room, just click exit and it will take you back to select a different room. We hope you have fun connecting. See you on Kumo Space.
Awesome. So that's where we'll head right after this awesome music that Mindy is going to introduce to you.
Thank you, Karen. So we're going to close out our program today with music from Playing for Change. They're a certified P Corp and they're created to inspire and connect the world through music. How beautiful. I'm sure you will enjoy. I hope you've also enjoyed the rest of our session today and the rest of the next 2 days. We are grateful for you for coming. And now we're going to hear Seeds of Freedom. So take it away.